Have you ever wondered what would happen if you took a juicy brain, threw on a couple of spooky eyes, gave that brain a mouth of pointed teeth, tentacles for arms, and then throw in some mechanical legs for good measure? No? Well, the 80s did. Some ladies, but mostly gentlemen, today we'll be focusing our attention on the mumbling gelatinous alien foil to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Krang. But not any Krang. Today I wanted to make Krang in his Bubble Walker because though fans may be more familiar with the android body, I personally always thought it looked a little goofy and my sensibilities sway more in favor of mechs with inverted knees. And to that end, I sketched out the front and a side elevation of a walker to an appropriate scale, the panels on which I can easily transfer onto a sheet of tracing paper. Then I can simply transfer this stencil to a thin sheet of clay by way of poking the corners and cutting out the stencils via join the dots method. And once I have one, I can use this as a template to make 3 more, giving me inner and outer panels for each of my delicious chicken thighs. And up to the main cabin, I recommend anyone and everyone get one of these bendy blades as they give a lovely smooth curve to your clay and ensure every sculpt has a certain level of danger. Now when I think about robot joints, I default to Star Wars and I detail a variety of little discs kind of based on the chicken walkers. And what you do here is a very personal choice, but what I like to do is take the more is more approach and add little discs atop of larger discs. I cut some discs. You can add a little ball to the center and press it in with a ball stylus for a nice little bolt, and I will always use the barrel of a 0.7mm mechanical pencil to add rivets. Unless of course I don't, in which case I'll only sometimes use a mechanical pencil for rivets. I'll give all the pieces a quick bake, then a wee sanding before gluing 3 sides of the cockpit together and test fitting a sketch I made of Krang. And as the dump truck is curved and voluptuous to the point it would give Dexter and Dee Dee's mom a run for her money in the bulk department, I added the back last and slightly oversized the edges so I can simply sand down the excess once baked. And on that note, I am thinking about making Dexter and Dee Dee but in a Dexter kind of way. So whilst I bend some aluminium wire into an appropriate action pose, do let me know in the comments down below if that's something you might like to see, or should I just continue making whatever crosses my somewhat unhinged machinations. Now this cockpit is a mere base and it just looks a little too thin to look as sturdy as it should, and so I'll lay down some clay adhesive, then we can wrap it in an additional top layer of clay which will of course be cut to size using the base as a template. And with my finger, I blend the connections together and finally add some panel separation via scale rule. It's off to the oven once more before the cockpit receives its very own aggressive sanding, and happy with that for now, it's over to the legs. And more carefully than usual, I'll add a coil of armature wire to the legs for a mechanical look, which will eventually amount to nothing as I ended up not liking this at all and filling them in later. You can see I've thrown Krang's leg out in front of him like he's off to the K-Lee, and I can start to glue the leg panels to the legs. It's so genius, it borders the line of madness. I can then glue joints to the knees and hips, add some random greeblies, and then move on to Krang's tentacle holes at the front of the walker. I said something different in rehearsal. This is simply a disc cutout, then a smaller disc cutout of that, and a gee willikers, would you look at that? Then nice. And as previously mentioned, I did not like this hole, so let's stuff it like a Christmas turkey. Once stuffed, I'll pack it tight and shape the edges with a generic metal tool and trim with a straight blade. I'll then cut to equal size a couple of fenders that I can drape over the top of the legs, and I'll add a couple of non-distinct greeblies to each for some asymmetry before adding random, completely spur-of-the-moment ribs to the shin that I can trim to the leg's edge. I did end up not loving this and added an extra vent later, which ended up looking much better. That aside, I had wanted to find some kind of clear plastic dome for the cockpit window, but alas, I was foiled. I just couldn't find anything. All DIY Christmas baubles were sold out, and light bulbs are all 100% frosted in New Zealand, so I opted for a roll cage approach, which I constructed out of some drill straightened wire and bent to size. With that, I saw the cockpit was sitting a bit low, so I made a little turret rotation bed out of a couple of discs that I can glue onto the lower body before adding the cockpit in its final position. And if I took anything away from 2008's Jason Statham classic Death Race, it's that every booty needs a shield. And the fact that movie is legally allowed to drink in most Western countries makes my kidneys bleed, and I might just change my name to Mother Gothel and hunt down Rapunzel. Note to self, build fortress in enchanted forest. With Krang's booty well and truly grilled up and protected, I'll add a couple of little greebly discs that do something that is assuredly a secret, and finish off the back with a couple of extra small panels I can texture with a scraping tool and a toothpick. A sharp metal ruler will allow me to sharpen up the edges, and after a quick twirl I decide that this walker needs some pistons, because who doesn't love a good piston?
How dare you!
Now, the way that I make pistons is secretly behind my hand, because sometimes you have to be mysterious, and sometimes you just forget to move the camera. But long story long, I always make my pistons with a timber dowel and a kebab skewer. I drill a little receiving hole into the dowel, then glue in the skewer, and it is simple but effective for a little soie de vie. I can then stuff the RoboCalf with the clay as we did the upper drumstick and position the piston, making sure it aligns with the shin direction. Then we're on to the feet. And for the feet, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do, so I just started making toes hoping to fall uphill. And wouldn't you know it, I fell my Irish ass all the way to the top. I started with double C thick toes that I could add a little metal strap to. I made 6 initially, but the 2-toe approach visually looked better than the 3 I had originally planned. So 2 it is. Each of the toes gets a hand-drilled hole, and I can form-fix them into a wire for now. The wires get shaped accordingly and wrapped in clay. The clay can then be trimmed to size and then further trimmed to have a more aesthetic profile, and once sized against the leg, I thought it looked a little bit flimsy, and thus I opted to add some treads. Said treads are merely oversized outlines of the foot that I can detail grooves into the side of, and once the foot is glued to the ankle, I'll add some non-distinct clay cylinders to cover up that messy joint, and I can repeat this on the other leg before adding some last paneling to the cockpit and moving on to our testicle with teeth and arms and eyes. Krang. Krang's inners are the beginnings of a mini technodrome that we can wax some flesh onto. 'Tis looking a little bit too vibrant, so I'll knock it back with a little bit of white. For the features, I'll begin by roughing in the mohawk with a general crescent scored in, followed by the perpendicular ridge lines, then adding the absurdly distinct ocular ridges and some lower eyelids. I'll give this a rough blending to make sure nothing falls off later, and then build up the mohawk to have deep ridges. Pro tip: when making something cartoony, over-exaggerate the features, assess how it looks yourself, and then revise accordingly. You're aiming for somewhere in between real life, but not so far as caricature. Think an actual T-Rex, how it would have looked versus whatever this is. A quick dirty bulk later and I'll add the eyes. Now, I know the eyes are traditionally blue, but from an evolutionary standpoint, we find yellow eyes more disturbing as they are associated with predators, sickness, and that guy she told you not to worry about. So we're going with yellow. Next up, I'll add a very sad smile via Noodly Doodad, and to age our interplanetary warlord, I'll also add some interdimensional under-eye handbags. With all the features blended in, I'll add the excessive wrinkles that only the weight of a tyrannical ideology and innumerable defeats at the hands of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and a sassy redhead can cause. This is achieved with a couple of sharp silicone tools. Each have a different firmness level. With clay shapers, the firmness is indicated by color, with black being the firmest, soft being the whitest, white being the softest, and blue and grey is medium. And as the face is the focal point, I spend a good amount of time adding copious wrinkles to all the central features before adding in some choice teeth. To reduce painting, I'm using all colored clay, as you can see, and the teeth are no exception. The teeth get positioned with my second favorite tweezers, and then I'll add some lumps or warts to the side of the head for no other reason than this is my channel and I do what I want. And today, I want pustules. Well, not I don't want not me personally. I don't. You know what I mean. For the final texturing, I take my ball stylus and carefully roll it back and forth over the skin everywhere that I haven't added dense wrinkles, and then that's us all done and off to the oven for a final bake. Or so I thought. You see, as some of you may know, I have a wee bunny called Gizmo, and if you drop something on the ground, he's going to eat it. Not to worry, in this segment, we're going to patch a clay brain eaten by a mini lop-eared bunny, and I'm going to show you how. So all you gotta do is simply lay down a layer of clay adhesive, add your repair clay to the affected area, and then retexture in the exact same way that you did before. If you need to, you can soften the edges with some isopropyl alcohol, but this guy is so wrinkly that in this case I really didn't need to, and he is very well textured. And truth be told, I don't like this one as much as I did the first one, but making things a third time is for nerds. And we gotta paint. To begin the paint job, I'll double trigger finger on a black base coat to the mecha legs. This is great for a metal as all our shadows are already established, and this mech will only be receiving 2 dry brushes. Dry brush the first is a coat of gunmetal. This is pretty subtle on the camera, but it does give us a really nice base metal to add our silver on top of. And speaking of silver, I dry brush the entire model very satisfyingly with said silver several times. The first dry brush is a general coat. The second, I focus on the areas of the panels that I want the viewer to focus on, and lastly I focus on the edges. In hindsight, I should have maybe added more edge highlights with a brush, but I really like this clean look and I wanted the sculpture to demonstrate that Krang was the brains and Shredder and the clan were more inclined to fight, hence the fresh out of the box look. And then it's on to the man himself. Krang gets a base red wash to both his tentacles and his head body thing, which I can give about 30 seconds to dry before dabbing away the excess with a paper towel. This is how it looks when it's just the wash, and he looks a little bit sunburnt. To remedy this, I sponge on ample amounts of pink to bring back that natural skin tone. I gradually add white acrylic to the pink acrylic in my palette to pick up the ridge highlights. I come through with a final highlight of brilliant white, and that's the pink flesh done. We then give the eyes a sunrise yellow, and here you can see the difference between a coated and a non-coated eye, and you can really see the difference in the vibrancy. Said eyes receive their life-giving UV resin cured by my UV torch, and finally, before we assemble, Krang gets a high gloss varnish. I wasn't initially sure if he should be wet or dry, but when in doubt, well, I don't need to elaborate. For assembly, I first glue the tentacles in place before giving them their own varnish to match the head. I then remove the supporting wire from the foot and I can nestle Krang into bed for the night. For the roll cage, I painted these the same gunmetal as the main body of the mech suit, and I glued them directly onto the cockpit, added some cross ties, quickly decided that I hated it, and removed them with gusto. And with that said, we are all done for another episode, folks. Now let's go get some turtle soup. As always, a big old thank you for stopping by today, and do let me know what you think of my rendition of Walker Krang, and indeed, if you want to see more turtle content. Who knows, if people like it, I could make it a series. Do all the things with all the buttons, and until next time, go make a mess.